Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're going to break down the Timberwolves' second-round pick, Rocco Zikarsky, a behemoth center from Australia. We'll talk about the Wolves' strategy to trade back, where the roster stands now, and why they traded back in the way that they did. It's all coming next. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Hopefully you enjoyed round 2 of the NBA draft on Thursday night. The Timberwolves entered it with pick 31. They came out of it with two future second-round picks. Big difference there. A little bit of cash and Rocco Zikarsky, a 7'4" center from Australia. We're going to talk about Zikarsky, what he profiles to be as an NBA basketball player, and also the methodology behind the Wolves trade back. Why they did it the way they did, my take on it. There's a lot of hot takes out there. I want to start with the prospect first, though, and talk about Zikarsky before we get to the why behind the methodology. So here's what we'll do today. I'll spend the first segment talking about Zikarsky, about him as a prospect, and then we'll spend the rest of the show talking about why Minnesota traded back the way they did, the assets they got in return, and what the roster looks like now, which is part of why they traded back and didn't pick somebody at 31, right? The roster's pretty full. We'll talk about where it stands and what's upcoming on the schedule. I mean, like, the next time we do a show on Monday, that's the deadline day for these player options for Julius, Randle, and Reid. So a lot to get to here today. So we'll jump ahead here in just a moment. First, though, a big thank you for making this show your first listen every day. Of course, you can find Locked On Wolves anywhere for free. You can watch on YouTube. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right, let's talk about the player first. The Wolves trade back from 31. They end up, after another trade back from 36, they end up at pick number 45, and they pick Rocco Zikarsky, 7'4" center from Australia. He's only 18 years old. He has a 9'7" standing reach. So we're talking like tiptoes, and he can dunk a basketball. 7'5" wingspan, just a mammoth person. Weight-wise, I think I saw like 280, which is not super big for a guy who's not super heavy for a guy who's 7'4", which is probably a good thing. Like, you can always add strength. You look, there's not a whole lot of definition or tone to his build right now. And so NBA strength and conditioning, as I always say with these guys, is going to be a big deal for him. Which, side note, apparently his entire pre-draft process was in Minnesota. And I don't know if like the Wolves just like kept him in the Twin Cities, or like, all right, man, we're just going to not let anybody else work you out. Like, obviously not literally that, but I mean, like, it sounds like he was just in Minnesota and obviously went to Chicago for the combine and tested well there. Like, a really impressive pre-draft process. And it seems like there were teams several months ago that had he was rumored to be a first-round pick. There was a chance he could get into the lottery and didn't end up playing as much or have the role that I think would have been beneficial to him in Australia. In terms of his kind of his background, his dad was a Olympic medalist as a swimmer, and his mom was like an Ironman competition person. So, like, talk about an athletic family. Apparently, like, watch some interviews of him. Like, seems to be a really personable guy with the media. Like, a lot of things to like about him as a prospect for somebody that I didn't know really anything about other than the name and the position and the size and everything coming into the Wolves pick. And cramming in what I've crammed on him, I'm very impressed. And I'm going to like do what I've done with the other picks and prospects over the last couple of weeks to talk about like the pros and cons of him as a prospect. And then next week, we're going to dig back in on these guys. And I'm going to go even more in depth after watching more film on both Berenger and the first round pick, and Zikarsky, the second round pick. But we'll do one segment today on Zikarsky and what he brings. What's most impressive to me is his mobility as a 7'4" guy with a 7'5" wingspan, and speed, really, like in the open floor, which is important. The fluidity and the mobility and the quick feet are most important on an NBA court, but also his top speed as there's a clip floating out there of him I can't remember if he scored or like was near the rim on the offensive end, and then gets a chase down block in transition, beats guys down the floor. From what I've seen, I don't know that like the motor is like top level all the time. But I mean, getting back in transition for a guy that big is, remember, he's 18. So like we've got a few years of him probably playing this hard with this much speed at that size. And man, it's really impressive. But even the feet in the half court, I think are pretty impressive. And for a guy that's so young, I think he reads things okay. Right now in pick and roll coverage, I don't know that he's going to do much other than drop. But again, with the feet that he has, I think he's got the ability to hedge and recover. And again, I haven't watched enough tape of him to see if he's done much of that, but from some scouting reports that some videos that I watched of him and some clips that I've seen, I do think he has the mobility to be able to hedge and recover and, kind of be mobile on the perimeter in that way. He's obviously, you don't want your 7'4" guy switched on to guard. So like, that's not something you're doing with him, but quick enough to recover. And that's super important. There's also, I wanted to mention, there's also a clip of him. You can find his agility drill at the combine, and that looks really good to me. I think light on his feet for a guy that big is very, very impressive. I think the athleticism is pretty good. How quickly he can get up and jump is impressive. His overall positionality when it comes to rebounding, or I guess positioning is a more normal way to say that, but the way he positions himself to rebound the basketball, especially in the offensive glass, activity level, the instincts for where the ball is, again, with a player of that age of just 18 years old, is very impressive. The offensive glass, the rebound rate was solid. The activity level was very good. And then along with that, you can see around the rim, he's got really good touch around the basket. And the free throw shooting is not great, it's not a big enough volume to be like genuinely concerned. I mean, we're talking over 2 years in the NBL, only 54 free throw attempts. He was 54%. So not great. The form looks okay. He shot 6 total threes over the last 2 years and made 1. The form is okay for a guy that big. He like bows his legs weirdly in, and the arms are a little, I mean, like he's 7'4" to 7'5" wingspan. So gangly is obvious, right? But he appears, based on what he's done around the rim and really his shot release, like I do think there's upside there as a shooter. I actually think he's got pretty big shooting upside, that he could be like he's not going to be, you don't need him to be a stretch 5, right? Like he doesn't need to be somebody who's like raining threes from the perimeter. But if he at least has the ability to stretch the floor a little bit, that's a positive. Now, like with Baron J doesn't stretch the floor at all. It's the vertical spacing that he provides, the ability to stretch the defense north and south, because you're worried about him dunking on you, right? It's like what the easiest example for Wolves fans would be what the Mavs did to the Wolves in the playoffs last year with their bigs as roll bigs, with Luka as the trigger man. Not that Ant will ever necessarily be the same level of passer as Luka, but Ant's always, it's a different threat. Ant and Luka are different threats, but they're threats nonetheless. And Ant has not had the lob threat, the vertical lob threat that Baron J is going to provide. And I'm not saying Zikarsky he's certainly not the level of athlete as Baron J, or level of a lob threat, but he could be a big that just dives to the rim and have gravity that way. There's also clips out there of a couple of nice kind of where he slips a screen, gets a pass, and dunks on someone. Like, it's gonna be harder to do in the NBA than it was in the NBL, but there's upside there for him to do that. And I think he can do it now too. I think right now he's going to struggle with the speed of the NBA game. And I don't literally just mean speed up and down the floor, although he might. I think he could rush things based on what I've seen. I think Zikarsky is, he's 18. He's going to get a little, happy feet when he gets the ball and like, I got to push this shot up on the rim. And we see that happen to Rudy Gobert. Turns out Gobert's had a Hall of Fame career. So like, it's not an unusual thing for a big to kind of get excited and like, I got to get rid of this ball when they get hot potato in the paint. So that's something that he's going to work on. I think some of the strength in his, like the positioning is good, but I think the lower body strength, he's got kind of almost a high torso where like the center of gravity is higher than you'd like it to be. And that could be an issue when it comes to rebounding. Like, he might be in the right place at the right time, but the technique may not be perfect when it comes to how he's going to try and go up for a rebound. So there's definitely some work to be done there. But I really like I'm doing my best to not just make Andrew Bogut comparisons because of the Australian connection and the size and everything. But I really like what appears to be the upside of Zikarsky. I would say his floor is lower than Berenger. Berenger can step in if he needed to now and be impactful defensively. Zikarsky, I don't think he has an NBA floor right now. Like, he can't step on an NBA floor and be effective right now. But the reports are, we'll talk about the contracts. Minnesota's going to sign him to a two-way deal. This has been reported in multiple places. So he'll have a chance maybe to see the floor in a game or two next season. Not that most of the two-way guys did for Minnesota. My guess is he spends the entire year basically in the G League, and then when possible, he's up to Minnesota to practice with the team and get exposed to those habits and everything, and how NBA players function. But I really like the selection. I think Zikarsky has really big upside, a low floor, but a really high ceiling. And there's going to be absolutely no pressure on him over the next 2 years. When that 2-year two-way deal is up in 2 years, then it's decision time, but he's still going to be 20. So plenty of time to find out what you have in Rocco Zikarsky. Now the Wolves get an exclusive 2-year window to do just that in their own facility and with their own G League affiliate. Let's talk about the process behind this and how Minnesota ended up with Zikarsky at 45 and the weeping of gnashing of teeth we saw in X over the Timberwolves trade back and acquisition of cash and the whole thing. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why they did it the way they did it. All that is upcoming here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Skims. When I found out that Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I'd heard a lot about their quality from friends and family, and I had to give it a try, and I'll tell you, it lives up to the hype. Skims actually sent a couple of pairs, and, I'm pretty picky about the underwear that I wear, the fit, the comfort. I walk around a lot for my job, and it's got to, and I also sit a lot. Like, I don't know, I guess I do both of those things a lot. And it's important to find the right style and the right fit and the right comfort. So what I selected when they said they were going to send us some pairs of Skims underwear, I asked for the stretch 5-inch boxer brief. I like them to be a little bit longer. I like the stretch material. They don't feel like workout underwear, but they're also like, the material is, I don't know, it's smooth. It's kind of like that moisture wicking type material. And they're great for an active lifestyle. They move with you. They don't lose their shape. They're super incredibly comfortable. If you're working out, I don't work out a ton, but again, I move around a lot and, run a lot of errands, things like that. I'm out and about. They're the most comfortable and reliable underwear that I've ever owned. Plus, again, the lightweight material, it feels amazing. And it almost feels like you're wearing nothing at all. You can shop Skims men's at skims.com. Let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, just select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop-down menu that follows. Again, skims.com. You can shop Skims men's at skims.com. All right. So the Timberwolves entered the draft. They entered the second round of the draft as well on Thursday night with pick 31. My prediction coming in was that Minnesota would draft one guy for their roster and kick ahead one of their picks for a future first-round pick. I was close to correct. They drafted two guys. Only one of them will be on a standard NBA contract. Zikarsky will be on a two-way. He apparently won't be a stash overseas. They're going to bring him over and sign him to a two-way. So technically that part was true. And they did acquire future picks, but they acquired two future second rounders and not a future first rounder. I was surprised at how things went down. So they entered with number 31. An hour and a half before the draft started, it was reported that they were going to be trading 31, moving back to 36 to get two future second round picks, and I tweeted this out at the time. Fantastic value. To move back only 5 spots in the second round and get two future second round picks is really, really good value. One of them's next year. It's the lesser of Denver and Golden State. So probably not a great second round pick, but a second round pick nonetheless. They just got Zikarsky at 45. Like, it'll probably be a pick depending on what you think of Denver and Golden State next year in the West, but they're both probably playoff teams. So we're talking about a pick plus or minus pick 50 most likely next year. And then also a 2032 pick, which will be the better of the picks between Phoenix and Houston, which obviously that's way too far in the future to know anything about. At this point, it's hard to imagine Phoenix figuring things out, especially based on the last couple of days. I don't know, based on the last couple of years, you could say. Houston appears to be in a much better position, but again, we're talking 7 years from now. So 2 future second round picks to move back 5 picks in the draft is awesome value. There's no other way to put that. Just fantastic, fantastic value. It just is. Then at 36, they traded back again. This is where things got a little bit dicier. They trade from 36 to 45. So they lose 9 spots, and all they get back is cash considerations, which, or cash, I guess, which I know that Wolves fans have a painful relationship with that. I'll never forget. I'm sure we could all remember where we were when David Kahn did the Kurt Rambis buyout trade back situation. I remember it was in my buddy's apartment, like the whole thing. I remember it. I remember realizing in real time what was happening. It was awful. It was terrible. A bit of light PTSD for Timberwolves fans who are draft heads. Like, I get it. It was awful. It was. And because of that, the NBA put rules in place as far as how much cash you can actually acquire on a draft night by trading back, by selling draft picks. Or I don't even think you can straight sell a pick anymore. You used to be able to do that. And now there has to be another asset attached to it, which is how you get the workarounds of like top 55 protected picks that you'll see occasionally. Weird stuff. We didn't see as much of that this year, but the trading back 9 spots to get cash isn't ideal. It's not. You'd love to be able to get another future second round pick, even if it is one of those kind of, BS, like, hey, top 50 protected pick in 2032. Like, that would have been better than cash, right? Especially from a fan's perspective. But the reason they kept trading back is clearly they were targeting Zikarsky, and Tim Conley said in his media availability after the draft, like, they clearly had a higher grade on him than a lot of people. But again, I'll go back to what I said at the start of the draft, start of the show today. Like a few months ago, people thought he could be a first round pick. And I mean, like a lot of people thought he would get drafted. It's just Minnesota thought they could get him at 45. Clearly that was he was a target they had. They could have drafted Adu Thero, who I really liked, at 36. They could have drafted Rasheer Fleming, who a lot of people liked. I was less high on him at 31. Like, there's a lot of guys they could have had there. And I know that fans are sitting here like, this is who I want. Like, why would they draft this guy? Well, they have a full roster. And we're going to get into the roster here in a minute. But like, you can't just acquire 20 guys and then be like, all right, we'll figure it out now. Like, you can't have, 20, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds just all kind of on your roster with unlimited roster spots and like the whole thing. That's not exactly how this works. And so if you find someone that you want to have on a two-way deal or is willing to be on a two-way deal, then that makes sense from a front office standpoint. The other thing Tim Connolly said in his media availability after the second round was how surprised he was. And I'll credit Dane Moore for putting this on X. Dane, let's see, I'm just going to pull up his exact quote. But watch the clip from Tim Connolly. He said he was surprised how curious how agent-driven the second round had become. He said they called players left and right. There were 20 deals done before the second night of the draft even started. 31 is fun, but maybe not as fun as we thought it was going to be. What that means is, remember, second-round picks don't have guaranteed contracts. It's only first-round pick, which is why 31, it used to be extra valuable. It's still valuable, but that's the deal with the first-round versus second-round picks, is that they're not guaranteed. So what are teams looking for? Players are looking for. Players are looking for teams that will guarantee them money in the second round. Players are looking for teams who will give them multiple years. Players are looking for teams that are guaranteeing anything, right? Because you don't have to promise anything. You can cut a second round pick, no questions asked. Think back to the year when the Timberwolves got Jalen Noel and Naz Reid. They actually got identical contracts. Naz Reid was undrafted. Jalen Noel was a second-round pick. But it was a really smart, partially guaranteed deal that Gerson Rosas, at the time running the Wolves front office, signed them to, where this was I think it was a full guarantee for the first 2 years and then partial guarantees for years 3 and 4. A very smart contract. And it's a win-win. And for the player, it's like, all right, I'll take the guarantee of, I don't remember what it was, what the contract value was. I'll take this guarantee for the next year or 2 years and the partial guarantee beyond that. And it's a win for the team because you have the cost certainty. You know what they cost. You can sign them for whatever that minimum is, and then have the partial guarantee. If you get them in your building and they're not what you want them to be over the next 2 years, you only have the partial guarantee beyond that. And so it's a sliding, like, teams, agents and players and teams looking for what's the best thing we could do for obviously the teams are looking for themselves and the player agent for the player. And so if there was a guy at 36 that, like, if the Lakers or whoever ended up with Thero, I think it was Lakers, said, like, look, we're going to give you this guaranteed contract, then you're not going to take Thero if he doesn't want to go there and he's got a guaranteed deal with the Lakers. You don't want to mess that up with the agent. And the Lakers are, no matter where they get him, this is what they're going to sign into or whatever that might be. And that's just, I don't know all the details to that, but it's that sort of a transaction. So that's why a team would move back like that in the second round, because that's one of the reasons. We're going to talk about the roster implications for Minnesota here in a minute. But if there's all these guys that have promises, essentially, you hear about this all the time in the NFL draft, a promise from a team, and they know they're going to get guaranteed or partially guaranteed money. And then like third on that list would probably be a two-way deal, which is what the Wolves were going to offer. Then of course that's where you want to go. That's how you want this thing to unfold. There's so many other layers to this that I think people don't always think about when reacting. Now, I think the criticism of not getting anything other than cash to move back 9 spots is somewhat fair. Like, you'd love to be able to get some sort of future asset that you can hang your hat on some level, that even if it's an asset to trade later, which is a lot of times what these picks end up being, that would have been better. And that's my only real criticism of this. I don't have any problem with moving back from 31. Because here's the thing. If they hadn't moved from 31 to 36 in the middle, if it had just been 31 to 46 and they'd acquired 2 future second round picks, that's even not all that bad. Like, I was hoping they'd trade out and get a future first. I thought that was a real possibility. And you look at what some of the other teams were able to get in trading picks, both first and second round. I still don't think that was a crazy desire for them to get a future first for 31. But ultimately, they moved back 15 spots, or 14 spots actually, to 45, and they got 2 future seconds. So you take out the 36 in the middle, and that actually doesn't sound too bad. The problem was they landed at 36 in the middle and took cash to go back 9 spots, which doesn't look as good, certainly, and the optics aren't fantastic. But it's also not like, I think, saying like Michael Bloomberg's in this ownership group, what are they doing? Like, that's not a fair criticism of what's going on here. I want to talk about the roster situation now and what some of the upcoming deadlines are, because the roster situation did influence what Minnesota was able to and not able to do on draft night. We do all that here next to close the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? It's summer. There's ball games all the time, Twins games, whatever. Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands over at Target Field. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you could splurge when you're at the venue on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. And Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On NBA, and that makes it super easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming game. An exclusive partner of Locked On MLB. It's MLB season, of course, the exclusive ticketing partner of Locked On MLB. Maybe don't live in the Twin Cities, whatever the closest MLB team is to you. It's June. It's a fantastic time to get out to the ball game. It's Independence Day here in America next week, and not a more American thing than going to an MLB game. Game Time is last minute tickets and zone deals for big savings. You can get 10% off exclusive zone deals for right now for FIFA Cup World Cup matchups as well. So check that out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, so following round 2, Tim Conley spoke to the media and talked about the roster crunch. It's a very real thing. Like, here's the thing. Coming into this draft, Minnesota had on their current roster guys under contract, 2 roster spots. Guess what? They drafted 2 guys. Now, one of them is going to be a 2-way contract, right? Zikarsky's going to be on a 2-way. Berenger gets a contract. That means they have 1 open roster spot. You know who that doesn't include? Our guy, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I'm not including him in that count because he is a unrestricted free agent. That count does include Julius Randle and Reid. Okay? So if Julius and Nas both opt in, and that deadline is Monday, actually, according to SpotRack, or Spotrack, or however you say this URL of this website, Nas's is actually Nas's is the 30th and Julius Randle's is the 29th. Either way, by Monday we'll know. But if both of those guys opt in, which I think they will, but if both those guys opt in, Berenger signs his rookie deal, now you only have 1 roster spot. 1 roster spot. That doesn't include your free agents, who are Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and then I guess the only other one would be Joe Ingles, would be an unrestricted free agent. The other decision, so that's the number one thing, is that you can't just keep adding guys. Like if they drafted Rasheer Fleming at 31 and he wants a full guarantee, or he wants an NBA standard roster contract and isn't interested in a two-way, now you've got a full roster. Your roster's full. What are you going to do? That's it. No free agency, no you can't take two guys back in a deal if you were to trade somebody. Like you're kind of locked in at that point. Now, the one piece of wiggle room here are some of the contract options we have upcoming. So, on Sunday, according to SpotTrack, the 29th, Josh Minott has a club option for just under $2.2 million for next year. Luka Garza also has a team option the same day for a little bit more than that, $2.35 million. So you've got two team options, Minott and Garza. You could choose to decline both of them, and now you freed up two roster spots. At the same time, you still have to fill those roster spots with somebody. So, yeah, you could have drafted somebody at 31 and said, we're going to let go of Garza or Minott, and we're going to keep Rasheer Fleming and guarantee him a spot. Well, do you think that rookie Rasheer Fleming or rookie whoever you draft at 31 is definitely going to help your team that's in win now mode more than, say, Josh Minott or Luka Garza? Could there be more upside? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. There probably would be. But it's those two things you have to weigh if you're the Timberwolves front office. When you're building a team, you can't have only 21 and 22-year-olds and 19-year-olds and guys that are long-term projects with high ceilings. Like right now on this roster, Leonard Miller is probably the biggest, like, quote-unquote project in terms of, well, not anymore with Berenger, I guess, but like you've already drafted Berenger. So you got Berenger and Leonard Miller as both kind of longer term project guys. I know Miller's going to be 22 this year, but I would still put him in that same category. Josh Minott now is a little past that age, but he's a little bit of both, where I've said for a year, I know he lost his opportunity last year because he had some bad games, and I understand why the Wolves didn't play him. But if I'm the Wolves, I would keep both those guys. I would. I think there's value in continuity. I think there's value in the floor of, what Luka Garza is going to give you. And he's a great locker room guy. The team loves him. All that stuff, the intangible stuff that you also have to consider. Is whoever you could get at 31 going to have a higher ceiling than Luka Garza? Yes, absolutely, unquestionably. Would they help more this year? Probably not. Probably not. As much as everybody wants Chris Finch to have this massive rotation, it's never going to be more than 9 guys, 10 at the absolute max in the regular season. So what are we doing then? Like, Luka Garza knows his role. He knows he's not a rotation guy, except for the small handful of games when Rudy Gobert or Julius Randle and Naz Reid's unavailable. And then he does what he does. That's the role. Like, you have to have guys that are okay in that role. Josh Minott is not quite the same. And so that's why I think there's actually a chance Minnesota keeps Garza and lets Minott walk. I think Minott has too much value still. I truly believe that there's upside there, that there's a team that would say, all right, he's our 8th guy and he's going to go out there and wreak havoc for, whatever, play hard and dunk on guys and play defense. I think there's value to Josh Minott. I would keep both of them. And then I would still try and sign Nikhil. You figure out what happens with Julius and Naz, and maybe you end up with a full roster. That's, if you bring Alexander Walker back, you've now got a full roster. And you could always waive somebody and eat the money, but you can't really, not when you're up against the second cap. That's not realistic. So there's a real possibility that happens. Now, I'm on record as saying this, and I still believe this to be true. I think Nikhil goes somewhere else. He's just going to get too much attention in free agency. There's too many teams that are going to throw an exception or more at him, a mid-level exception or more, and the Wolves aren't going to be able to match that. And good for Nikhil. Like, you got to do what you got to do. And there's good teams that'll try and sign him too, or he could get a little more money, probably go to a bad team. But that's just the reality of this. That's the second apron NBA is you can't keep everybody together. So if Nikhil leaves, now you've still got one roster spot to play with, even if you bring back Garza and Minott. And not that you have cap space, you're going to sign somebody for a minimum, or I believe they still qualify for the biannual mid-level, which is a smaller dollar amount that they'd be able to sign somebody for. I thought I had the number in front of me, but I don't. I believe they still have that. So that's still my prediction. I think that both Randle and Reid opt in. I think they get an extension done with Naz Reid. I think ultimately Randle probably doesn't sign an extension anytime soon. And I think Nikhil goes somewhere else. They have one roster spot to play with throughout the offseason, and we've seen Minnesota kind of leave that spot open and see how things shake out, even into the season. Now, of course, in the offseason, you could expand your non-guaranteed roster all the way up to 20 players, so there's room for like another 5 guys. or I guess another 3 guys, if once they sign their 2-ways, which, by the way, if Zikarsky signs this 2-way deal, their 2-way deals from last year have expired. So Jesse Edwards, Tristan Newton, and Bones Highland are all free agents, restricted free agents. So that's another thing we'll keep an eye on. There's still going to be news, Timberwolves news, but they're not going to be major free agency players. But that's why Minnesota did. They're not going to pull a Brooklyn. Brooklyn drafted 5 guys in the first round for some reason the other night. And like, I don't know what they're up to, but like, that's not what Minnesota's going to do. They didn't have the roster space to do something like that. Was it poor asset management? The big picture is no. You turn 31 into 45 and 2 future second-round picks. Was going from 36 to 45 for cash bad asset management? Yeah, that's fair. But in the grand scheme of things, like, not that big of a deal. And they landed in a great spot with the high upside prospect in Rocco Zikarsky. Next week, we're going to dig in Monday. By the time we record for Monday, we may not know the answers to the options of what's going to happen, but we'll do a more expanded version of this last segment here. We'll also next week dig a bit more in on some of these, both of these, Berger and Zikarsky, the newest Wolves. We'll have press conferences and all that stuff coming up next week that we'll talk about what happens there and free agency starting. So there's a lot happening. We'll have a couple of guests next week too. A lot upcoming. That's all I got for you today, though. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.